retire early, withdraw money from your 401k before 59 and a half, and avoid the 10% early withdrawal penalty. There's a smart and simple way to do this that not many are probably even aware of. Hello, Diamond NestEgg members, super savers, and course fans. I hope you're healthy and well. So, besides sharing the best rates and investment ideas with each other, one of the things our VIP investment club members often do is ask questions. Sometimes they're straightforward, but every now and then there may be a special one that requires Marcus and I to think a bit outside of the box. Today's video is about one of the more complex questions that has crossed our desk in recent weeks, and a potentially life-changing one, or at least a potentially retirement plan-changing one that might resonate with a number of you in our Diamond NestEgg community at some point in time. How to pay for early retirement. Let's say you're in your early or mid-50s and want to leave your full-time job behind. Maybe it was your dream all along, or maybe circumstances changed at work. Be that as it may, you've made up your mind and you're looking forward to devoting more time to your family and all the other interests that you never had enough time for before. Money-wise, you may feel reasonably comfortable that you can make it work because you've accumulated a nice retirement nest egg over the years. However, there's just one issue. You're not 59 and a half yet, so you might be hit with an extra 10% early withdrawal penalty tax on the money you will need to take out of your retirement accounts. Wouldn't it be great if you could avoid this additional 10% penalty tax on early withdrawals and be able to stretch your savings just a little bit further? Well, the good news here is that you might be able to do so whether you have a 401k, 403b, traditional IRA, or other qualified pre-tax retirement savings plan. The bad news is that it can be complicated, and you may have heard about the stiff penalties that the IRS threatens to impose if you don't comply with all the conditions to the letter. So let's talk about how it would all work and how you may be able to simplify the whole process while making it audit-proof, so to speak. Here are the 3 topics I'll be covering today. 1. What is IRS Rule 72T, or SEP? And how does it work? 2. How might an annuity simplify the early withdrawal process so that you don't get into trouble with the tax authorities? And how much might certain annuities pay you? At the time of this taping in early May 2026, interest rates remain at some of the highest levels that they've seen in the past 20 plus years. So this might be a good moment to take a look if you're interested. And 3. What's our personal opinion? Let's dive in now, folks. What is IRS Rule 72T, or SEP, and how does it work? Let's start again with the good news. It seems that under certain circumstances, the IRS code can be surprisingly flexible and may in fact allow you to make withdrawals before 59 and a half from your traditional 401k, 403b, or other qualified IRA or pension plan without paying that extra 10% penalty tax. These special circumstances may include death, disability, and the so-called Rule of 55 for employees who separate from service in or after the year they turn 55. I've linked our video on the Rule of 55 below for you in case you're interested, because this is also not a straightforward process. But let's say none of these special circumstances apply to you. For example, because you're not turning 55 yet, or maybe because the bulk of your retirement savings are not in a qualifying plan with your current employer. Or perhaps you mistakenly rolled over your 401k into an individual IRA without realizing that this would prevent you from using the Rule of 55. That's where IRS Rule 72T comes in. IRS Rule 72T allows you to take early withdrawals before 59 and a half without incurring the extra 10% early withdrawal penalty, regardless of your age, as long as you follow an IRS-approved method to pay yourself in substantially equal periodic payments, or SEP. In this video, like so often in real life, we'll use SEP, SEP, PP, the abbreviation for substantially equal periodic payments, as a shorthand for the entire Rule 72T as well. So, unlike the Rule of 55, SEP applies not only to qualifying plans with your current employer, but also to 401k or 403b plans from previous employers and IRAs that you may hold in your own name. Note, though, that you must already have separated from your employer if you want to use Rule 72T for 401k. Here's how SEP works. Step 1. You calculate your annual withdrawal amount using one of three IRS-approved methods: the fixed amortization method, the fixed annuitization method, or the required minimum distribution method, or RMD. More on these shortly. Step 2. You begin to withdraw the total calculated amount from your retirement account for that year at the frequency of your choosing: annually, semi-annually, quarterly, or monthly. Step 3. You continue taking payments for at least 5 years, or until you turn 59 and a half, whichever is longer. Ending early or changing the IRS-approved method for calculating your annual withdrawal amount will trigger retroactive 10% early withdrawal penalties, including interest on all prior withdrawals. The only exception is that if you choose either the fixed amortization or fixed annuitization method, you can make a one-time switch to the RMD method. More about that later as well. So, how do you calculate the annual withdrawal amount under SEP, right? Let's start first with the fixed amortization method, and let's assume that you're 50 years old with $1 million in your IRA. If you set up your SEP plan using the fixed amortization method, you would have to define a fixed annual withdrawal amount, which you would then have to take every year for at least 9.5 years until you turn 59.5. Do note that you cannot choose the fixed annual withdrawal amount completely freely by yourself. It has to follow an IRS formula that includes a life expectancy factor and certain constraints on permissible interest rates. I'll save the deeper dive into the actual calculations for another video, if there's enough interest, as the math can get fairly complex. So let's use an illustrative example and say that your fixed withdrawal amount is $60,000 per year under the fixed amortization method. This would give you a predictable income to work with. In your budget, the yearly amount would generally not change. Please remember that while you could avoid the extra 10% early withdrawal penalty tax for as long as you stick to the plan, you would still have to pay ordinary income taxes on this $60,000 per year. As always, Diamond NestEgg is not a tax advisor, and this video is for educational purposes only, including all the illustrative early withdrawal scenarios that we're talking about. Any financial decisions that you choose to make are entirely up to you. Please always consult with your trusted tax, financial, and/or annuity advisor for your personal situation. Moving on now to the second allowed method under SEP, the fixed annuitization method. It's similar to the fixed amortization method in that it defines a certain annual withdrawal amount that stays fixed for however long you use SEP under Rule 72T. And similar to the fixed amortization method, you have to follow IRS guidance on expected mortality and permissible interest rates to set the fixed amount. In real life, the yearly amounts under the fixed amortization and the fixed annuitization methods will usually be very similar under the same assumptions. So, in our illustrative example, both should give you a withdrawal amount of about $60,000 per year if we use the same age and interest rate. That said, because the fixed annuitization method uses more advanced insurance math, there may be some differences, and often the yearly amount may be a tad lower than under the first method. Now, both these methods, fixed amortization and fixed annuitization, have the advantage of fixed yearly payouts, but also the potential disadvantage that they don't take the potential impact of changes in the market into account, which leads us to the third method, the required minimum distribution or RMD method. Under the RMD method, the annual withdrawal amount will vary because you calculate this amount every year based on your latest account balance and a life expectancy factor from an IRS table. This means that when markets are up, your annual withdrawal amount goes up. And when markets are down, your annual withdrawal amount goes down. And if the markets don't move much, or if you have a portfolio that's not very sensitive to markets, then your changing age factor, as well as the size and speed of your own withdrawals, will largely determine how much in RMDs you will have to take every year. In other words, the advantage of the RMD method is that the market-based adjustments to your nest egg mean that you run it down slower in bad market years. The disadvantage is that the variation in annual withdrawal amounts year over year makes planning and budgeting somewhat harder. Plus, once you select this calculation method, no changes are allowed. You cannot switch to one of the other two fixed methods. For the fixed amortization method and the fixed annuitization method, the advantage is the predictability in annual income, since payments stay the same every year, making planning and budgeting a bit easier. But on the flip side, the disadvantage is that your annual withdrawal amounts do not adjust downwards if markets go down, which could deplete your retirement savings faster, unlike with the RMD method. And this danger of running out of savings too fast in bad markets is also the reason why the IRS allows you a one-time switch from either the fixed methods to the RMD method, as I mentioned before, so that you can take out less in bad times and not run down your nest egg too fast. And to repeat, this one-time switch from one of the fixed methods to the RMD method is the only switch that the IRS allows. Otherwise, you're stuck with the method you initially chose for as long as you have to follow the SEP plan. Do keep in mind that none of the three methods allow you to take personal circumstances into account. If you suddenly need more than your calculated annual withdrawal amount before you turn 59 and a half and have completed the 5-year minimum duration, you would not be able to withdraw more without breaking your SEP plan and incurring fines. And if you were to stop taking your annual payments early, you'd similarly trigger the retroactive 10% early withdrawal penalties, plus interest on all prior withdrawals. So, as we've just seen, early withdrawals from a 401k, 403b, or a similar qualifying retirement plan can be a potentially powerful tool to enable you to retire early. But they can be complex to calculate, set up, and manage. Plus, if you breach the rules even at a later stage, and maybe even inadvertently, you run the risk of having to retroactively pay the 10% penalty tax on all previous payments as well, with interest on top. And that's why it's so important to set up any SEP plan in a very precise and structured way to avoid this non-trivial risk of getting a potentially large penalty tax bill in the future. Without geeking out too much about it, this did take me and Marcus a bit of brain power, but we managed to find a smart and simple way to do this after a few conversations with our trusted annuity specialist. So let's talk about that in the next part of today's discussion. And if at any point the illustrative sample numbers that we're about to share with you pique your interest and you want to see what they might look like for your personal situation, email us at jennifer@diamondnestegg.com so that we can connect you with our trusted annuity specialist to see what the best annuity product might be under SEP for your early withdrawal circumstances within the IRS's guidelines. How might an annuity simplify the early withdrawal process so that you don't get into trouble with the tax authorities? And how much might certain annuities pay you? As we just discussed, the IRS gives you a pretty tight set of rules to follow if you want to withdraw money early from a qualified retirement plan without having to pay the extra 10% penalty tax on top. And the sanctions can be harsh if you don't meet all the criteria. One way to mitigate the risk of non-compliance is to not manage your SEP, your substantially equal periodic payments, yourself, but to invest in an annuity from a trusted insurance provider who manages the SEP for you and sends you a regular check in the right amounts that follow the IRS's guidelines. Not only will the right annuity ensure that your regular payments will strictly follow one of the IRS-approved methodologies and be properly paid out and documented for a potential audit, An annuity with a lifelong guaranteed income will also ensure that you'll never run out of money, meaning it will give you downside protection, while potentially even giving you some upside in the markets if that's what you want. How you usually do this is to first speak with your trusted annuity specialist to decide on the right annuity product for you and the appropriate SEP amounts per IRS rules. For example, when you withdraw early from your qualified retirement account, are you just looking for a lifelong paycheck? Or might you want to participate in some of the gains on the S&P 500 for a bit of growth and/or inflation protection in your portfolio? Once you've signed your annuity contract, your trusted annuity specialist would roll over the investment amount from your 401k, 403b, or any other qualifying plan into a separate personal IRA. This IRA would then buy the SEP-compliant annuity inside the IRA. These movements should all be tax-free and would give you a clean setup. And as soon as the next month after your annuity purchase, your regular SEP checks might start coming. The payments would generally be subject to ordinary income tax, like for any distribution from a pre-tax retirement plan. There's no way to avoid that. But the extra 10% penalty tax on top would be avoided under Rule 72T. To give you an idea of what that could mean, let's look at some illustrative sample rates for 3 possible SEP-compliant annuity options in this table. And let's take a hypothetical example who we'll call Joe. Joe is a 55-year-old male who has left his job and wants to start receiving income from his traditional 401k now. But he does not want to pay the extra 10% early withdrawal penalty tax and/or potential IRS sanctions from missteps along the way, from miscalculations, for instance. Joe plans on allocating $1 million from his traditional 401k towards a SEP-compliant annuity so that his guaranteed paycheck for life starts as soon as possible, as early as the next month potentially even. In this first column, we have the annuity type. In the second column, we have the rating of the insurance company per AM Best, a credit rating company that specializes in the insurance industry. In this column, we have the lifelong guaranteed income amount per month. And in the next 2 columns, we have the guaranteed surrender value at age 60 and at age 67. And let's start with a single premium immediate annuity, or SPIA. Remember that with lifetime SPIAs, you essentially make a one-time payment to the insurance company, and in return, the insurance company pays you a guaranteed income for life. This SPIA illustration here is from an A++ rated company. A++ is the best rating that an insurance company can get from AM Best. So, for the $1 million investment from Joe's traditional 401k, the guaranteed lifelong income amount per month might be $5,683 for as long as Joe lives. And spoiler alert, this SPIA will pay out the highest monthly check on this table here. The reason is that a SPIA is irrevocable, meaning that there is no guaranteed cash surrender value at any age. Once a SPIA contract is signed and the 30-day free look period is over, you can't get out of it. There's no way to stop the payments and get a part of your initial investment back. This is different from a fixed indexed annuity, or FIA, the next SEP-compliant annuity option on this table, also from an A++ company. A FIA with an income rider, as in this case, combines a guaranteed monthly income for life with more flexibility. Not only may your principal participate to a certain degree in growing markets, if you choose an appropriate investment option, such as the S&P 500, for example, you might also be able to exit early and get a part of your initial investment back. Here's what we mean. This FIA may pay a lifelong guaranteed income amount per month of $3,875. This is less than the $5,683 for the SPIA from before, but in return, you, or in this case, Joe, may be able to exit the FIA early and get a part of the remaining balance back. So let's say after 5 years, after Joe turns 60 and has met the 5-year minimum duration for the SEP amounts as well, he decides to go back to work and doesn't need the monthly paycheck anymore. Maybe Joe got bored in early retirement, Or maybe he got an offer he couldn't refuse. But if he accepts employment again, he may be able to sell his FIA back to the insurance company at this guaranteed cash surrender value of $712,502. Of course, the monthly checks would stop coming, but Joe would then be free to do whatever he wants with his money. Please note that the $712,502 guaranteed cash surrender value at age 60 is basically a floor for what you might get when you exit the contract early. Except for some potential fees and charges, for example, during the initial surrender period, as specified in your contract, you should in principle get at least this amount if you terminate the contract early. And it could even be more if Joe had chosen an investment strategy that let him successfully participate in a growing market. And if it turns out that Joe just needed the regular payments to bridge the time until his full retirement age of 67, then he could still stop the payments at age 67, let's say, and get at least the guaranteed cash surrender value of $525,154. Again, this amount might be potentially even more depending on the underlying investment strategy and how markets develop. Let's move on now to another example of a FIA with an income rider. And while our two previous examples were from insurance companies with the highest rating of A++ from AM Best, this FIA here is from an insurance company that's rated a bit lower, at A. And we see the difference in the numbers. So the same $1 million investment would get us to a lifelong guaranteed income of $5,083 per month, reasonably close to the SPIA, while still keeping the option to exit the contract early and take a guaranteed cash surrender value of $666,608 at age 60 or $329,059 at age 67. So, if you want to look at it this way, this last FIA here combines a payout that's not much lower than for the SPIA with a good part of the flexibility of a FIA in terms of the cash surrender value that we discussed before. Now, many of our Diamond NestEgg regulars will likely already know what I'm about to say right now. The underlying secret for this potentially attractive combination is the lower credit rating of the provider here, single A versus A++. Just like with bonds, the lower the credit rating, the better the annuity rates and or payouts usually. Now, this may not be to everyone's taste. At the end of the day, it's really a highly personal decision how much risk you want to take with your annuity provider, especially if you were to exceed the protection limits of your state guarantee association. Remember, these illustrative sample rates are for a $1 million investment, but you can also follow a similar strategy with a $100,000 or $250,000 investment from your traditional 401k. As I always say, everyone's financial journey is different. Please keep in mind, though, that this is an illustrative example with sample rates that are subject to change at any time and without prior notice. Your actual rates may depend on your age, state of residence, investment amount, and a number of other factors, and will only be fixed when you sign your annuity contract. Annuities are not for everyone, but if you are retiring early with a good chunk of retirement savings locked up in your 401k, and you want to withdraw before age 59 and a half without incurring the extra 10% penalty tax and or risk potential IRS sanctions from missteps and or miscalculations along the way, email us at jennifer@diamondnestegg.com so that we can connect you with our trusted annuity specialist who can help you find the best headache-free, SEP-compliant annuity for your personal situation. There's no cookie-cutter, one-size-fits-all annuity solution. And in particular, when you're considering using them as a means to simplify such a complex retirement topic that could impact the rest of your life. And as I touched upon towards the beginning of this video, at the time of this taping, in early May 2026, interest rates remain at some of the highest levels that they've seen in the past 20 plus years. So this might be a good moment to have a look if you're interested. Right. Now that you know how a SEP-compliant annuity can potentially make the early withdrawal process from your 401k easier and minimize the risk of unpleasant visits and penalties from the tax authorities, as well as how much the different SEP-compliant annuities may possibly pay, let's move on to the next part of today's discussion. What's our personal opinion? Rule 72T can be complicated, but it may open up a potential avenue for someone who wants to retire early for whatever reason to get regular cash payments from their accumulated savings in a traditional 401k, 403b, or another qualified pension plan without paying the extra 10% penalty tax before age 59 and a half. And in our minds, using an annuity for your SEP exemption under Rule 72T may make sense if you want to be sure that your regular payments will strictly follow one of the IRS-approved methodologies and be properly paid out and documented for potential audit without the headache of doing it yourself. Of course, some in our Diamond NestEgg community may prefer to do it all by themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that either, so long as you have the time, knowledge, and inclination to do so. That said, this isn't as simple as buying treasuries on Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard, where we can just create a step-by-step tutorial. There are too many variables within your financial and retirement life to consider, and too many IRS rules and regulations to comply with, which is why an annuity may simply be a good option to get some help with the technicalities and reduce the execution risk and sleepless nights. And as for which annuity you may want to choose from this table, annuities come in many flavors, so it all depends on your personal circumstances, goals, and expectations. But here are some guidelines on how we personally think about it. We might choose the SPIA with its comparatively highest guaranteed monthly check for life if we were planning to keep the extra income stream for life, and we're reasonably sure that we wouldn't make use of the flexibility that the FIAs offer via their guaranteed cash surrender values here. Remember, SPIAs are irrevocable once the contract is signed and the 30-day free look period is over. And with SPIAs, given the guaranteed lifetime component to this, personally, Marcus and I might be inclined to stick with the highest rated A++ insurance company, and even more so if we were to invest an amount that exceeds the limits of our state guarantee association, as we would want the highest level of certainty that our payments would last for many years, hopefully decades. And we might choose one of the FIAs here if we wanted to keep the flexibility to potentially exit the contract early and get some of the principal value back via the guaranteed cash surrender value. For example, either because we couldn't exclude the possibility that we might re-enter the labor force after a few years, or perhaps because we might not need the extra check anymore once our regular Social Security checks start coming. The trade-off between the A++ and A-rated insurance companies may be a bit more complicated, including whether to prioritize higher running income versus potentially higher guaranteed cash surrender values over time. But at the end, the two of us might be tempted to go with the A++ rated insurance company if we don't absolutely need the higher monthly checks. But that's us. As I've said often on this channel, Marcus and I see annuities as the base for retirement, where we prioritize safety, stability, and predictability above all else. We reserve the risk-taking for the boost part of our portfolio that's focused on growth and inflation protection. And we'll be diving deeper into the details of our base and boost strategy in upcoming videos. Drop a comment below and let me, Marcus, and the community know, are you potentially considering early retirement? And if yes, would your preference be for a SPIA or one of these FIAs here that should be all SEP compliant and as headache and audit proof as possible? And as always, email us at jennifer@diamondnestegg.com if you're interested in connecting with our trusted annuity specialist to see which annuity might be best for you and what the rates might look like whenever you're watching this. All right, Diamond NestEgg members, super savers, and course fans, I hope you enjoyed today's video and learned something new. And see you again very, very soon with more brand new wealth building content for your financial journey.